Hello everyone, good morning and a huge welcome to our very first Health and Wellbeing live event of 2022. And what a cool event this one actually is. For any of you that don't know, my name is Jamie and I'm a former runner, a physiologist and now part of the Vitality Coaches team. And I'm really privileged to be hosting this session today. So firstly, Happy New Year. I hope you're all very well and keeping healthy. But for today, there's no messing around. I'm going to get straight into this one. Our guest is a superstar. He's known as Super Maro Itoje, the Pearl sometimes, as he's often affectionately referred to as. He's not just a Vitality ambassador. His accolades are pretty long, but I'm going to do my best to get through them. So he's a 4-time Rugby Premiership champion, a 3-time European Champions Cup winner, a 3-time Six Nations Championship winner, as well as being included in the British and Irish Lions and the World Rugby Team of the Year individually for 2021. And I promise you I've rehearsed that so many times and it's not easy to say. But in addition to his quite frankly ridiculous list of rugby related accolades, Maro has also established himself as a global star off the field, where he's recognised and I think really well respected as an activist for change, a politically minded thinker, a podcast host, a model, generally just a force for good in the world, I would say. So Maro was born in Camden, where his parents moved from Nigeria. He attended Harrow School, where I think his rugby career really took off. And he has established himself as an outstanding performer in every team he's featured ever since then, really. So today, what we want to do is understand how Maro conducts his business on and off the field, and how he maximises his potential and consistently achieves those high levels of performance. So Maro, we've got a job to do right now, which is to figure out how to get you on camera. It's a real privilege to have you with us today. Thanks so much for your time. We've nailed the first job. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you
Of
for
course.
the words as well. You're far too kind.
Honestly, it was hard the intro to do because I could have taken so many different angles. There's so much to get through. And actually, when I was reading your bio before this, on top of all those things, physically, you're 6'6", over 18 stone. It's amazing how much you and I have in common, I think.
Precisely that. I think what do they call it? Brothers from another mother.
It's not the first time that's been said to me, and thankfully this is virtual, so no one can actually figure out how big I am. So I'm going to go with that one for today. For everyone watching as well, we've considered all of your questions that you've included beforehand. So thank you so much for getting involved and submitting those. And at this stage, if you want to navigate yourself to the right-hand side of the screen, you've got Juliet behind the scenes who's keeping an eye on things for us. She'll be forwarding your comments and questions onto us, so please do get involved in this chat. So Maro, I wanted to start personally for you and on the topic of motivation. We've just confirmed that you've achieved a pretty incredible amount at the age of just 27. And I can appreciate that doesn't come without a huge amount of drive, determination and hard work. So I want to touch on the World Team of the Year that you were recognised in recently. That is a sort of tip-off for being at the absolute pinnacle of performance. Like, you are the best player in your position in the world. What do those kinds of personal accolades mean to you?
Good question. I feel as if those personal accolades, they definitely do mean something, and they're definitely, I'll be lying if I said that I don't aspire to consistently being recognized as, one of the best players in the world, or so on and so forth, because, personally, that's important to me, because, I want to be the best player that I could possibly be. And when others, are recognizing you in that kind of space, it's an honor, it's a privilege. But with rugby, more so probably than most other sports, you can be the best player in the world, but if your team is losing, you're not going to be recognized as one of the best players. So it's really one of those sports where you need to perform well on an individual basis, but you need to make sure the team is performing well, because you can't achieve anything without the success of the team.
Yeah, of course. I think that's definitely a section that we'll get onto is the team element. But you mentioned a couple of things there about being the best and how the recognition from others is such a nice thing to have, and I can I can definitely appreciate how that would make you feel. In terms of the way your motivation comes from in that pursuit of wanting to be the best, would you say that's something that's more intrinsic within you, or actually are you open to say that I do enjoy the fact that others can appreciate what I do as well?
So for me, it's a bit of both. I think it's predominantly intrinsic, but the external praise and external recognition is also, a validation of some of the hard work you choose, and it's a bit of a balance because whilst it's nice to receive external praise and external recognition, you don't want to let that external praise and recognition almost like define you or have your self-worth valued within that external praise and recognition or what other people say, because I think whenever solely or identify by what other people how other people perceive you or what other people say about you, I think you're spiraling into a slippery slope, which more often than not can lead to quite negative outcomes. But for me, I'll definitely say, just through the nature of, how I've been brought up, how I've, conducted myself, I definitely do want to be, the best rugby player that I could possibly be. And for me, I believe my ceiling as a rugby player is quite high. I think my best game is if I play my best game, I think that's a very high level. So for me, it's constantly striving to reach my ceiling. And you don't know what your ceiling is. You don't know how high it can be. So
Yeah.
my mindset is to constantly look and strive and try and get to a place of higher performance that perhaps I haven't reached before.
It's interesting that you say that. I've heard Eddie Jones before talk about how he wants to coach the perfect game of rugby. And you mentioned there about your kind of family. And I know British Nigerian heritage. I might be wrong here, but I don't imagine that rugby was huge on the agenda for you when you were younger. So where does that self-belief, maybe is the word, but where does that strive to want to achieve the best in rugby come from, do you think? Because it's a real innate drive, like you say, but are the values that you learn as a youngster instilled in that, or is it other things that you think have influenced you since?
Yeah, I think a few things are factored into that. I think the first part is, as you rightly said, rugby is not a sport that is necessarily close to the culture of a Nigerian family. It's for my family, it's something that has been acquired as time has gone on, as I started to play rugby, as my brother started to play rugby. So there was never any pressure from my parents to be a great rugby player or be the best rugby player that you could possibly be. There was never any push from them. They just thought it was one sport that I was playing just to have fun at school. They had a fairly innocent view with it. But what they did have was high standards for myself and my siblings, particularly with education, particularly with the way I went about anything I did in life. My dad used to say, if you want to do anything, just do it well. Don't take shortcuts, all these kind of mantras. So I guess all of that has also passed on to myself and probably my siblings as well. The second part of that, I think I'm just a competitive person. I I like winning. People have way more fun when they win as opposed to when they lose.
Yeah.
You want to be in winning environments. You want to have fun. You want to, you know, be a part of memorable occasions, memorable stories, and the best way to do that is to win. Especially if you can do that with people you get along with, people that you're drawn to. I think that's an extra win. But all in all, I love winning, and the enjoyment of winning is way more fun
Yeah.
than so you might as well try and do all your best to make sure that you're in that winning environment.
You're really good at it as well, by the way, Maro. You've cracked that one. One thing that I think you picked up on there, which I always say to people as well, is that I am a massive advocate for sport. I really feel it can change your life, and for reasons that are probably not even related to sport, but those disciplines and values around it translating into other areas of life. So being disciplined and being consistent and working hard. And you mentioned teammates a few times as well. And like you say, I can appreciate the accolades must be incredibly well received. But successful rugby teams obviously require significant input from your teammates. And so we're really interested to understand from the established teams, cultures that you've worked within in terms of Saracens, England's and the Lions. You've obviously got amazing experiences across all three of those. Are you able to share some insight into the notable differences, if there are any, between those? And again, any possible examples, because you mentioned there about winning culture and things. Is there anything between the three that you say are different? And if so, how are they?
Yeah, I would say that culturally, three very different environments. I'll say like Saracens is your club, so or my club. So you spend the most amount of your time there. You have, those people that's been there you've known for years. Perhaps you've grown with them in the academy. You would have seen them as even if you're a little bit older, you see them as a young, aspiring rugby player and see how they develop over the years to the player they are now. You probably have more of opportunity to get to know their families, their loved ones, etc., etc. So by saying all of that, you have the ability at club level to come a lot closer to a lot of your teammates. But even regardless of that, Saracens is an environment which has, a very unique culture, has a very unique, family kind of environment where there's genuine care for the players, for the staff, the support staff, and I think by and large you see that within with the way the club operates and their performances on the field. England is a very high performance kind of environment. It's about finding that extra edge, finding that extra inch. And with England, you have at any one time, give or take, you have 30 of the best players in the country all together. So by that, that automatically the level, the standard is higher because of the quality of personnel. So you don't necessarily have that. You don't have that quality at club level. 1 to 30. There's players who all the players that are the main players for their club. So you don't have that level of quality elsewhere. So England is very much a high performance environment, striving to be the best in the world, looking for every inch. They're generally more intense than the club level because you're with England for a shorter period of time. So there's so much more for you to catch up on. But all in all, it's pretty good. Lions. So Lions is again, you have 4 different countries, 4 different identities, 4 different cultures, trying to mesh them into one. And earlier we spoke, and at Lions you have not only the best players from the clubs, but you have the best players from the country. So everyone at the Lions is a starter for their club and country. Everyone at the Lions is used to being the guy that people rely on. So then you have to find a way to bring all these people together and try and bend people into environments where they were the guy at their club and country, but they may not be the guy here. Yet you might have to take a secondary role, and all for the greater good of the Lions. So it's again another interesting kind of dynamic at play there. But all three environments that I've been a part of. we've had relative success at every level. And one thing that being in those three environments is that there is no one way of creating a successful rugby team or a successful period for a rugby club. There's different ways to make it happen. You can have slightly different cultures. You can have slightly different ways of going about, slightly different team processes, slightly different standards. But one thing that does connect the three environments is that in order to achieve success, there needs to be a strong element of hard work. You need to be very good at the fundamentals. You need to have a team first kind of mindset. You have to put your ego aside for the team. You have to think about the greater good for everyone as opposed to thinking about yourself. So there's a number of themes and threads that connect but all environments or all successful environments together, but they can look very different from the outside or in terms of their culture.
Yeah, it's amazing that you kind of describe the different levels and the things that change as you up those levels. And obviously the intensity and the competition is the main thing that you mentioned. And I think it sounds like from you as a person, that's what you thrive on. I was just wondering though, because out of those three that you were talking about, Saracen sounds like home. I know that they do so much for the players as well, and there's initiatives to support the community, and it's got that much more closer family feel. Do you think it would be possible to incorporate any of that into, say, an England or a Lions team? Or if you were to do that, do you think you'd lose some of that competition edge and that kind of fierce rivalry?
No, I think you can, and I think they, both those organizations try and do that. The England, they put a lot of effort into keeping up to date with players, families, and partners, etc. And so they feel involved in the whole thing. And the Lions, they always make an extra effort to reach out to the partners, but just because of the time pressure that is associated with an England environment and a Lions environment, it just makes it a lot harder in order to deliver on. Whereas at club level, you're with them every day. Everyone kind of lives near the club, so it's just much more easy to facilitate that type of feel.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting that you speak about that, because obviously time pressure is something that you can't control, but we're just thinking about kind of our audience in terms of workplaces trying to achieve high performance, or anyone in their job. And actually something which is interesting, I think, is kind of you're now an established player in both not only the England team, but also you've been on a few Lions tours as well. So do you try and bring anything of yourself into those dressing rooms to help other players who are new to it as well? Like, are there things that helped you back in the day when it was your first time? And what sort of things do you do to lead by example with those?
I think the biggest thing that I try and do is just trying to be my authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you're young and getting into a rugby or getting into a team, whether it's a new team, whatever, you're super keen, but you also probably have a little bit of anxiety and nervousness, like wanting to, make a good impression, and you want to fit in, and you want to express yourself, but you don't really know how you're going to fit in. What I like, now that I'm a bit more comfortable, I try to encourage others to come in and try and just, express yourself within the environment, like not be, try not to go into one's shell too much, because, every human being is one of one, and you want to get the most out of people. I think they need to have some level of comfort within the environment they operate. They don't want to feel as if they're walking on eggshells. I think they want to feel empowered. So especially for the young guys coming through, I think it's massively important that they just feel that they're valued, whether they have no caps or whether they have 100 caps. You know, they feel valued, they feel important, they feel like, you know, they're heading in the direction of the team. And I think that's an important thing, especially with international rugby. You don't really have too much time. There's not too much time. As we said earlier, there's a time pressure. So you need to try and get all these people up to speed as quick as possible.
Yeah, I really like what you say there about kind of being authentic and bringing your true self. The best thing anyone could do to me is say, what you're doing is good and we just want you to be you. And I think that gives you freedom. And there's certain players that you see just have that total freedom. Like someone like Marcus Smith at the moment just seems to play like he wants to play and doesn't feel that pressure. And that's how he brings his best. And obviously something that has a huge impact on that is coaches. And again, trying to relate this to our audience in terms of if you're in a management position. So Maro, we often hear coaches, they'll talk about what they expect from their players and they drive a hard task. But similarly, managers will be open with their expectations of their workforce and their employees. But what I think is discussed maybe a little bit less is how players and employees, for example, prefer that relationship to work. So would you be able to share with us maybe a little bit about your relationship with your coaches? And for example, like what aspects you like about being coached and how they get the best out of you? Like, do they know your trigger points? Like, are there certain things that work better for you than others? Are you more of a personal individual? And kind of like, again, if there's coaches that you've worked with and they really got you and you wanted to be the best for them.
Yeah, so I think something that, you know, when you believe, and I think this transfers way past just rugby. I think when you believe that a certain individual cares about you, I think you're willing to do so much more for that individual, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. So with the coaches that I've, you know, really enjoyed playing for and working under in the past, there's always been, you know, a sense of care, where they genuinely care about you doing well. Obviously, the coaches, their primary loyalty is towards the team. They must always do what's best for the team. But within that, from a player's point of view, if I have a coach that I know cares about me and wants me to do well and is supporting me to be the best player that I could possibly be, I think that's one of the biggest things that you can have or you can do. Secondly, I'm a guy, I'm a person that likes, you know, straightforward, like honesty. So if there's a problem, if you know you think I'm playing, but mainly on the negative side, to be honest, if you believe that I'm not playing well, if you think that I'm doing something wrong, you know, I like to know where I stand. So if you straightforward tell me, look, Mara, you're doing X, Y, and Z wrong. We need to do that better. You know, I appreciate that. So, and I think in the world of business and, you know, managing people, I think honesty is the best policy. So being accountable to that honesty and trying to be true to that honesty is important. I don't necessarily with coaches when I don't really like if there's an issue, if there's a problem, let's not sugarcoat it. Like, what is the issue? What is the problem? Let's find a way to fix this problem. And I'll probably say those two things are the biggest or the most crucial two things for me that separates, you know, the best coaches from the worst. The best coaches are honest with you and they do show that level of care. And just due to the nature of, you know, team sport selection, etc., you won't always agree. You know, fortunately, it hasn't happened to me much as of yet, but you know, a coach may come in and be like, okay, I don't think you're playing well anymore. We're going to go in a different direction. But if the coach delivers that to me with is honest with me, and he shows that he, cares about my like well-being as well, then you can't, I guess you can argue, but the judgment is, you're like, okay, at least you're clear with what you need to do and what needs to happen for you to then change your position. So I think those two aspects are crucial, and they're easier said than done.
Yeah, I was going to say that because I think that there are two things which it's really important that you get your approach right with them, because like you say, if you're too honest and you say it in the wrong way to the wrong individual, it's not going to be well received and it's not going to be accepted. Similarly, if you show care almost too much, then people would think you're a soft touch. And I remember Alex Ferguson was known for this, that he could, 1 minute, he could literally lose it with you, screaming at you, and then the next day he'll come in and say, it's your dad's birthday today, send him my best wishes. So he kind of reminds you, but also keeps you on edge. So I'm just wondering if there's I'm a strong believer that everyone affects everyone that they interact with, and they don't always know how much that is. Even someone in a shop, if they're nice to you, they smile to you, that can have a huge impact on your day. So that any occasions where something a coach has done has stuck with you, or it's kind of made you realize he really does care about me, or do you know what I mean? Like, are there examples where you think, I just needed that reminder at that point and they got it kind of right?
Yeah, I think there's been a few. There was an occasion where, you know, there was, there was a couple months ago where I was playing, and I was playing okay, but I probably wasn't playing to the level in which I thought I could play. Then I went to I went to go and see one of my coaches at the club, and I asked him for some feedback. Then as he was like, he was looking at me, and in my head I could tell that he was deliberating how he was going to tell me what he was going to tell me, and his head was going like this, looking at me. He had like a wide smile on his head. Then he was just like, I don't think you can do more. I think you can, I think there's so much more in you. I think you're not playing badly, but there's a level that you've gone to that, which I think you can, surpass, and you're not doing it at the moment. And for me, whilst that conversation was, it wasn't too uncomfortable, but it was a little bit uncomfortable in the sense that, no one really likes to hear, relatively negative feedback.
Yeah.
But it was perfect for me, because like I was like, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I'm happy that I had that conversation, because what I dislike even more is that people thinking stuff about me, or without saying it to me.
Yeah.
I'd rather us, know where the line in the sand is, then
Yeah.
we can, hopefully look to deal with it.
Yeah.
There's been coaches that, have gone the extra mile for me, and like time away from training, but looking over clips with me, like going over the plan, going over the theory of how we want to unlock a certain type of defense or whatever. And yeah, it was all those kind of stuff. Like, you really do appreciate it, and I think that's another way of showing that a certain coach does care about you.
Yeah. I think it's interesting you way you say that your coach at club there was kind of deliberating how they said the message to you, but I'm sure whilst they were doing that and stalling it, they're probably looking for cues in you. And like you said, you being you were kind of like, just say it, like, it's fine, like, this is what I need to know. So I think that's a really good point, that managers need a good level of emotional intelligence to understand who they're talking to and how they deliver that message. Maro, so far I could get stuck on these topics for the whole time, but I'm conscious to keep moving on. So I want to just touch a little bit about this session is all around preparing for success. But obviously in January, it's a tough time for a lot of people. But we wanted to understand a bit more about how, like, you approach looking ahead. So the most simple level, like, how do you approach goal setting? Is it something that you do? And who do you allow to input into what you believe is possible for you?
Well, I think first of all, I think with goals, I think it's important to have ambitious goals, but also, realistic. So whilst I would never have a goal of, like, I want to win 10 games this season or something.
Yeah.
Whilst that is, very realistic and, definitely achievable, but that's not ambitious. Whereas to have a goal of, I don't know, I want to buy Buckingham Palace by the end of the year, like, incredibly ambitious, but it's not going to happen. So there's a level of, I think first of all, it's important to establish ambitious goals, but, have a sense of reality to it, but don't let that reality diminish your dreams or diminish what you could achieve, because I think it's better to have an ambitious goal and fall a little bit short than to have a mediocre goal and just always achieve it. So I think with goals, that's how I try and approach it. And often, like, you have a long-term goal or a long-term aspiration, but at the same time, you don't really to focus on the big goal further down the road all the time can be potentially unhelpful, because when you're focusing so far down the road all the time, you may lose focus on what's here in front of you on the day-to-day basis. So my theory and thought process is, to achieve the goals that I want to achieve later down the road, I need to make sure that these little goals, these day-to-day goals that I experience every day, that I'm, ticking them down, succeeding here, and focusing on the here and now. Because I think if you continue to focus on the here and now, with a little eye on the big goal in the future, but focus on, the little steps that you need to achieve to knock that big goal down later down the road, I think it leads to a much more successful outcome. And that way, I think you can also enjoy the journey. I think you stay in the moment a bit more and you enjoy the journey. And, people always say, surely one of your goals is to, win the World Cup, and of course it is, and that's a fairly big goal, which I do think is achievable. But in order to achieve that, we need to get A, B, C, D, E, F, G right all along the way, and we need to focus on, if you're completely failing A, then you fail, then you pass A, then you don't look at B, trip up on B, trip up on C, trip up on D, then we're actually moving further away from the goal as opposed to moving closer to the goal. So that's my approach to goal setting.
I think it's such a brilliant answer, because you're saying, of course, you need to focus on the process, but you're not denying the fact that you do see the end goal. And I think that's what happens when you put too much emphasis on just the end goal. You trip up on the enjoyment of the initial part, but also when you get to the end goal, then what happens after that point? And Maro, I guess there's certain things that you need to work on individually and as teams in order to achieve those goals. And David Young is a sports psychologist who works with Man City and the England cricket team. And we recently did a conversation with him as well. And he spoke about the importance of understanding players' kind of super strengths and how you nurture those. And those are actually the important things. So how do you evaluate? Obviously, when you set your goals, you need to be performing at a level to work towards achieving those. How do you look at your strengths and weaknesses, and how do you decide where you focus your attention? Like, are you someone that says, I'm good at this and I'm going to get even better at it? Or I'm good at that, I need to look elsewhere to get everything up to a similar level?
Good question. I think and ultimately it's a little bit of both. You know, there's certain things that there's certain things that make that player him. It makes or her. It makes that player good, and it's important not to lose sight of that, because if you lose sight of that, then you're no longer that player. But at the same time, each player also has a number of weaknesses. Each player, you know, also has some blind spots which need to be worked on in order to progress, or need to be worked on in order to become the type of player that you could be, or become a much more fundamentally sound player. So with that, it's important to work on your weaknesses and try and get that to a level. But at the same time, your strengths, the things that make you, that exciting player, you need to work on that. You need to progress on that, because if you lose that, then you're probably going to become average, and that's what makes you you. Whilst obviously you may have some weaknesses, you may have some inefficiencies, but for you to be, the best player that you can be, your strengths need to grow. And if you can increase your strength as you go on, and slowly decrease the inefficiencies in your game, then all in all, you become a much more rounded player. I don't think it's either or. Just focus on your super strengths and forget about your inefficiencies, because the inefficiencies is what the opposition sees, and that you need to try and hopefully eradicate some of those issues. But at the same time, your strengths are what makes you you.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is that you don't want to lose you, and it goes back to your point about being authentic and being your true self. And I'm going to ruin this quote, but it's something like, weaknesses only become a problem if they become starting to impact the rest of the team, and there's issues that you need to address. But what you don't want to do is take everything to an average level. You're going to have some peaks and troughs in there. I just want to quickly touch on this one, because you mentioned about other teams highlighting weaknesses and things like that. So with regards, when you set up for opponents, how much do you consider their strengths and weakness? I'll be honest with you, I've listened to your podcast, Pearl Conversations, definitely check it out. And your cousin gives you grief occasionally. I've heard him say things like, when Bath are preparing to play Saracens, he doesn't prepare for you. He talks about he just runs in straight lines through you. I'm sure that's not true, but how much do you actually look at the opponent and think, I need to adjust my game, or are you fully confident in what you bring anyway and it's good enough?
Well, first of all, I'll address that quote. And to be honest, that conversation has aged well, because at the moment Bath have won 1 out of 11 games this season, so I think they should probably focus a bit more on what the opponent is doing. But no, what you said does apply. When I look at the opposition, because just with anything, like, we as a team, we have certain strengths. As an opposition, they have certain strengths, and you want to minimize, when you play teams, you want to minimize their strengths, and exploit them with their weaknesses. And to be honest, any game of rugby, or any game in general of team sport, you want to play a majority of the game based around your strengths, and a minimal amount of the game based around the opposition's strengths. And the team that has the better balance of that is a team that wins. So give me a rugby team.
Gloucester.
Gloucester. So Gloucester, they have a strong maul at the moment. So they have a strong set piece and they have some quite electric, very quick backs. So with Gloucester, you don't really want to be giving them too many set piece opportunities with the line out more, etc. Or you don't really want to allow their quick wingers. They have probably two of the quickest wingers in the Premiership at the moment. You don't really want to be giving them too much, time on the board to run. But where they're not so great is like phase play. You can break them down in phase play, and if you get good attack, you can break them down, and in their kicking game, and if you can exploit that, you can probably get good returns out of them. So every team has their sets of strengths, sets of weaknesses. South Africa are a very, very dominant. They have very, very dominant forward pack. They love a scrum. They love a line out. If it was up to them, they would just have scrums and line outs for 8 minutes of the game. But if you can break that up and reduce their set piece opportunities and play a much more expansive, loose type of game, they don't particularly like that. And that's the balance of every game. It's trying to play the game according to your strengths as opposed to the opposition's. The best teams traditionally are teams that can almost do everything. So a team that had very few weaknesses in the past has always been New Zealand. As a little bit different now because they were almost fundamentally sound at every aspect of the game. But that's that kind of situation. It doesn't apply to that team anymore. So every team has something that you can target them with.
That's fascinating. It's almost, and I think what's really interesting there is clear how much hard work and preparation you put in off the pitch, and people obviously can respect the physicality of the game, but it's amazing that it's like a game of chess where you're understanding their strengths and weaknesses, and you need to align your team to make your strengths stronger than their weaknesses, and that's obviously ultimately how you get the end result. And Maro, I appreciate that your day job is pretty unique. Like, there is a clear win and lose situation, and that might be difficult for some of us to compare with, but your approach and mindset are certainly things that we can learn from. So I want to touch on a little bit about pressure and concentration, because you're performing right at the limit, and our audience today will be dealing with numerous challenges daily, and inevitably at times it can be difficult to focus. And in all honesty, I want to know, when you're playing in a high pressure situation, I was actually at Twickenham when you played South Africa, super tight game. Do you sometimes think in the 80th minute or like 78th minute, did I put the bins out? Like, I asked this because Will, who works in our sponsorship team, he was telling us about how James Haskell, in the 24 hours prior to a game, had to follow a certain ritual, because that way his mind was at rest and he was able to fully direct his attention to the task at hand. So how do you make sure that in the right times and situation, your focus is fully on the situation? And I guess in sport, you're trying to get into that flow state, but outside of that as well, are you able to share anything that's helped you to remove those distractions and kind of helped you be in the moment and performing?
Yeah, I think focusing is a skill, and with all skills, you need to practice it in order to be good at it. You need to practice the skill. You need to harness the skill, and especially in high pressure moments where the crowd are making loads of noise, the opposition are trying to unsettle you, that you feel as if the referee is against you. All these different factors at play. There's a load of external noise, particularly in and around international games, in terms of like media speculation, media interest, etc., etc. So there's a lot of different factors at play, and loads of different scenarios that could potentially affect you or or distract you from what you need to be focusing on. But the way I try and approach it is just focusing on what's in front of you and going through things almost play by play. Because if you think, again, similar to the goal setting, if you think about the outcome, if you start thinking about the outcome of the game before the game has ended, then that is taking you a little bit away from your immediate focus, which may be just running back to get in the defensive line, or just getting off the floor and going to where you're needed, or your role within the line out. And if you think about, oh, I just missed that tackle, my coach is going to be angry with me when I get inside, then you've taken a little bit of yourself away from your next action. So, I think you have to focus on what's in front of you, focus on your next job. And if you continue to focus on your next job, then that generally tends to lead to better outcomes at the end of the game. If you allow certain things to distract you on the move, then that's taking you away from the game, and whatever is trying to distract you is ultimately winning, and is ultimately succeeding in getting you a little bit off your game. So I think all of that plays into part. But that being said, it's not something that is particularly easy. It's not something that you can say, okay, it does take practice, and you have to be intentional with it. So all of that plays a role.
Yeah, I think it's a constant job looking after your own mental health and well-being as well. Like, a lot of what you're talking about is just being mindful and being present, but you have to keep yourself in check with that, because inevitably your brain is going to take you somewhere else, but it's about bringing it back to what's in front of you. And it's nice to know that even in those high pressure situations you can stray, but you've got to train yourself to bring back to it. Maro, I'm conscious of time always, and there's so much that we could cover here. We should have made this, well, for my sake, much longer. I'm not sure for yours, but something which I know has been significant in your career, and I'm sure was unusually challenging for you to deal with, is when your club Saracens were relegated from the Rugby Premiership at the end of the 2019-20 season, and for reasons really not related to rugby as well. So I guess you were really loyal to the club at that point, and you stuck with them, and they're in an amazing position right now. But I'm fascinated to understand how it was for you to be playing international rugby one week whilst playing in a different environment the next, where you're probably against clubs that aren't always fully professional as well. So how did you find that experience? But also, how are you able to maintain your level of performance? Because were there times where, I don't want to use the word complacent, but where you weren't as up for it as you previously could be? Because let's be fair, you're really good. Like, you knew you were going to be in a good position, but you obviously want to maintain those standards for yourself rather than being compromised.
Yeah, I think the number of factors at play here. I think the first one being the biggest challenge I found playing in the championship was the mental challenge, because most of the time when you play in the Premiership and you play international rugby, for me, like I don't know if the right word is a fear or acknowledgement that if I don't play well, the opposition team could win. They will win. Whereas in the championship, if you don't play well, you can still, beat 99% of the teams, if not all of the teams.
Yeah.
So that, not having that, because that kind of anxiety slash acknowledgement I feel as if that keeps me honest, and because, as I said, I don't want to lose. I don't want to be part of losing environments. So I feel as if that kind of feeling keeps me accountable to something. So the biggest challenge of playing in the championship was losing that. But conversely, I definitely didn't want to play in the championship for a game longer than I needed to. So I think collectively we acknowledge that we need to make sure that we play well, or at least and win these games, so we're not here next season. Because if we were there this season, that would have been catastrophic.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think it goes back to the question of like, what is the motivation for a team and an individual? Is the motivation extrinsic motivation, or is it internal motivation? And if your motivation is internal, it doesn't matter if you're playing Cornish Pirates or Nottingham or who else do we play, or Evening or whatever, because like you have your own standards and you have a level that you're aspiring to or you want to go. Um, so your opposition really shouldn't matter. You need to be pushing and aspiring to reach higher and higher and higher levels, and if you don't do that, then it probably is telling you something about your own levels.
Yeah, I think that we were discussing something similar to this before, and we've also spoken about in this conversation about like the effect that you have on other people and how important that is. And again, that goes outside of rugby to anyone watching today. There's a South African philosophy that we were discussing beforehand called Ubuntu, which is about without you being you, I can't be me. And everyone has a responsibility to bring their best self in order to help others perform better. So by you, Maro, focusing on your game, naturally you'd have brought up the level of everyone around you. And like you say, I think you did it in such a professional way. You got the job done, and now you're back where you need to be. And I think that's really important. And I think the final topic really for us, now that we've kind of established how you approach your rugby career, is just quickly kind of life away from rugby, because you are someone who does so much and is known for so much and is almost bigger than the sport. Your profile goes way beyond the sport. And relaxation, I think, is a massive point with performance and being able to recover properly. And I know you've got interests in business and politics and podcasts and fashions and all those sort of things. So what do you do to help you relax? But also, like, how does that help you maintain your performance on the field? Like, do you feel like it complements it?
Yeah, good question. I feel as if well, like I think whilst I love rugby, I think time away from rugby, doing different things, exploring different things, makes me appreciate the rugby a whole lot more, and it stops or helps stop the burnout or the potential burnout that could happen if you're 100% just rugby, rugby, rugby all the time. Everyone's different and everyone will have slightly different levels, but for me, that is important. And like doing different things to recover, both over the last couple of years, I've tried to increase the level and professionalism of my recovery. So that has been a massive step forward for myself, and that's been really really beneficial. But yeah, I like to have an active mind. I like to have an engaged mind and be involved and think about a whole load of different things. And I feel as if that really does help me become a lot more of a rounded person. And I think if you're a more rounded person, then you'll be a more rounded rugby player.
Yeah, I think Hector Bellerin's obviously a footballer who's probably been both praised and criticised for his activities away from being an athlete, as someone who's got lots of interest in other areas. Have you ever been questioned on that, either by teammates, players? I know pundits probably have, but how much interest in that you take, I'm not sure. But like, do you have a response to them in terms of you, as long as your game's good, you look after that? Or are there times when maybe you aren't performing as you feel you should, that you then have to question the things that you're doing off the field? Like, is there pressure to do that?
Yeah, I think the way my approach to all of that is that um, you have to keep the main thing the main thing. So playing rugby is my job, is my first and foremost. That's the most important job I have at the moment. So I have to ensure that I keep that my rugby, the time I dedicate to rugby, is never compromised. If I ensure that that time is never compromised and I'm doing exactly what I need to do, then with the time I have after that, then I can use that to do whatever passions or interests or whatever that I have. If I'm in a situation where, okay, I'm like, oh no, I've got this meeting that I need to go to. Let me skip this session because it'll make it easier, give me more time to get to the meeting. I think when you start doing stuff like that, then you're going into dangerous territory there.
Yeah.
So like keep the main thing the main thing, keep rugby the most important thing in my calendar. Then that time's protected. That time is is sacred,
Yeah.
and everything thereafter, then I can use the free time to do that as long as the main thing is kept the main thing.
I think your dedication is so obvious and clear, and your discipline as well. Maro, really sadly, particularly for me, this session does have to come to a close at some point, and I appreciate, I'm sure you've got a million other things to do on that note today, and if you've got training, I don't fancy Eddie Jones having a go at me for you not coming correct. So we've come to try and end our sessions with one question, which is the same for all of our guests. And positive behavior change is central to kind of like the Vitality program, and helping people make positive decisions is a big part of our core purpose. So the final question to you, we didn't give you much preparation time for this, so I appreciate it's quite a tough one. But the question to you is kind of, what is the one change that you've made that you've realized has had the biggest impact on your life?
I would say the one change, or this, I would say the single thing that has had the biggest impact on my life is the power of being intentional. So being intentional with your thoughts, being intentional with things that you want to achieve, being intentional with the type of person that you want to be. I think when you're intentional with things that you want to do, things get done. If you're not intentional, then you kind of go with the wind. It may happen, it may not happen, and you leave it to fate. I think when you're intentional with the type of actions and behaviors that you have and you want to be, then that the likelihood of success goes through the roof. And with that, I feel as if you're more in control of the variables and outcomes of that success.
As with all of your answers today, been so insightful, and I think reminds me of something that action leads to motivation, and if you can get into that cycle, success is obviously something which is a longer process but will come your way. Maro, it's been like a real pleasure to be able to spend this time with you. I think that you are like inspiring a generation on and off the pitch, and I think your mindset and your approach to life is really aspirational. I want to learn more from you on that, and I think we should hang out some more times as well. But thank you so much for your time today and for being so open as well. I guess this session is just about exploring these conversations. So we want to wish you all the very best as well for the Six Nations coming up in just a couple of weeks' time. I know you've got training camp that you're heading to soon as well. So we're all right behind you at Vitality, and obviously we're always going to be your biggest fans as well.
No, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed the conversation, and I hope all of the Vitality members who listened in and watched, they enjoyed it too. So all the very best. Thank you very much for your time.
You're a legend. Thank you. And on that note, for everyone watching, please do download our full program of events for January in the handout section. And you'll also be greeted by a feedback form at the end. So we'd love to get your thoughts and what more you'd like to see in the future. But in the meantime, thanks again, Maro. Thank you, everyone else, for joining us. Please do take care, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon.
All right. Bye-bye.